Your four favorites are Donnie Darko, Oppenheimer, Love and Mercy, and Burning. My top choice for you is A Beautiful Mind. Like Donnie Darko, the protagonist is paranoid and questioning his reality. Like Oppenheimer, it's a biographical film based on someone who was considered a genius. That's also something it has in common with Love and Mercy, in addition to being about mental illness. And like Burning, it's about obsession and perception. First Reformed, like Donnie Darko, is about existential dread, sacrifice, and the end of the world, but in a very different sense of that phrase. Like Oppenheimer, it depicts a man who's haunted by feelings of guilt, complicity, and moral responsibility. Like Love and Mercy, it paints a psychological portrait of a man in crisis, whether it's a mental health crisis or a crisis of faith. And like Burning, it's a slow burn character study. The Master, like Donnie Darko, is about a psychologically unstable protagonist. Like Oppenheimer, it's about power and depicts a man struggling to adjust to his life after his involvement in World War II. There's at least one relationship in this movie that reminds me of the dynamic between Brian and his psychologist in Love and Mercy, involving manipulation and control. And that also makes me think of Burning because one of the characters in that film is charming and manipulative. Take Shelter, like Donnie Darko, has a protagonist who experiences apocalyptic visions or visions of impending doom. Like Oppenheimer, it's about a man who's haunted by visions of catastrophe. Like Love and Mercy, it's about mental illness. And like Burning, it has a feeling of unease and ambiguity. The Aviator is an epic biographical film like Oppenheimer that spans decades, including the 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's about mental illness like Love and Mercy. It involves at least one plane crash like Donnie Darko, and it's about obsession and isolation like Burning. The Imitation Game, like Oppenheimer, is a biographical film about a genius whose work had a substantial impact during World War II. And there are comparisons I could make to Love and Mercy, but I feel like they might be spoilers. But it's also based on a real person, so I'm not really sure if it can be considered a spoiler. Amadeus is also a biographical film about a man who was considered a genius like Oppenheimer, and like Love and Mercy, that genius was an immensely talented musician. And like Burning, it's about jealousy and obsession. Since you like Donnie Darko, I want to recommend Harvey because it's also about a man who sees a giant rabbit. Speaking of which, in the movie Ruby Sparks, the protagonist says it's like that movie Harvey, except she's not a giant rabbit, and that protagonist happens to be played by one of the stars of Love and Mercy, Paul Dano. And this film blurs the line between fantasy and reality like Donnie Darko. Like Oppenheimer, it's about dealing with the consequences of creating something beyond your control. And like Burning, it's about insecurity, obsession, and projection. A lot of people have compared I Saw the TV Glow to Donnie Darko. In fact, the directors of both films had a whole conversation about it for Interview magazine. But they're both coming-of-age films set in the suburbs that have a surreal, eerie vibe and leave viewers questioning reality. The Machinist came to mind because it's a psychological thriller like Donnie Darko where the protagonist has trouble sleeping. Except in this film, he's dealing with insomnia, whereas Donnie experiences sleepwalking. 12 Monkeys also came to mind because it's sci-fi that plays with the concept of time in a way that I think is comparable to Donnie Darko. I think you might like The Butterfly Effect because it's a sci-fi thriller involving time like Donnie Darko. Like Oppenheimer, it deals with guilt, unintended consequences, and at least one explosion. And like Love and Mercy, we alternate between different timelines, so we get to see the protagonist when he's younger and older. Since you like Oppenheimer, I think you might like Failsafe for the way it builds up tension and explores the consequences of nuclear weapons. But I also want to recommend another biographical film since you've got both Oppenheimer and Love and Mercy in your favorites, and one I think you might appreciate is Steve Jobs. The Lives of Others, like Oppenheimer, is about a man wrestling with guilt, complicity, and conscience during wartime. You already saw one of the first musical biopics I thought of when I saw Love and Mercy, which is Control, and I don't want to just recommend a bunch of musical biopics for the sake of it, so I was thinking more in terms of movies that are about musicians and mental illness, so I think you should check out The Devil and Daniel Johnston and Frank. Also in Frank, one of the characters wears a giant paper mache head, so it's kind of like the giant rabbit costume that Frank wears in Donnie Darko. But one musical biopic I think you might like is Better Man, although I might just be saying that because of the chimpanzee, because there's a giant rabbit in Donnie Darko. I don't know. Mother, like Burning, is a South Korean mystery film about someone who's fixated on their perception of the truth. And another South Korean mystery that came to mind is Sleep, because the man in this film is a sleepwalker like Donnie and Donnie Darko.